Emma Clark pressed her nose against the cold viewport, watching stars streak past in brilliant lines of light. Her father had told her 3 times to stay in her seat, but the view from the observation deck of Nexus Station was too beautiful to ignore. The 7-year-old girl had never seen anything like it. Ships from across the galaxy drifted past like metallic fish in an endless ocean. "Emma, please come back here." James Clark's voice carried the exhaustion of a man who had spent the last 6 hours preparing for the most important diplomatic meeting of his career. His daughter turned, her brown pigtails swinging, and skipped back to where he stood adjusting his formal ambassador robes. "Sorry, Papa. I just wanted to see the dragon ship when it arrives." Emma's eyes sparkled with excitement rather than fear. James felt his stomach tighten. That was exactly what worried him. "Sweetheart, remember what we discussed. Dragons are not like the creatures in your storybooks. They're real, they're powerful, and they're very dangerous." He knelt down to meet her eyes. "When the summit begins, you must stay in the observation room with the other children. Promise me." Emma nodded solemnly, but James saw the curiosity burning in her gaze. His daughter had inherited her mother's fearless nature and insatiable desire to understand everything around her. Rebecca would have been here, but her deep space research mission wouldn't conclude for another 3 months. James wished desperately that she were here now to help manage their adventurous child. The station's speakers crackled to life. "All diplomatic personnel report to Summit Hall Alpha. The Dragon delegation has entered station space." James took Emma's hand and led her through corridors filled with aliens of every description. Torin, the reptilian ambassador from Scalemere, passed them with barely a glance. His usually confident stride seemed hurried, almost nervous. Chancellor Vex, whose insectoid species governed 12 systems, moved past with her security detail, her compound eyes darting in every direction. Fear hung in the air like smoke. The Summit Hall. Summit Hall Alpha was designed to impress. The ceiling rose 50 feet high, displaying a holographic representation of the galaxy. Platforms floated at various heights, accommodating species with different preferences for elevation. Hundreds of diplomats filled the space, representing civilizations from every corner of known space. James guided Emma to the secured observation area, where a handful of other diplomatic children waited with their caretakers. A young boy from the Aquarian delegation waved at Emma through the transparent barrier. She waved back enthusiastically. "I'll come get you as soon as the opening ceremonies are finished," James promised, kissing her forehead. "Stay here. Stay safe." "I will, Papa. Good luck." James hurried to his assigned platform just as the hall's main entrance began to glow. The temperature in the room climbed noticeably. Conversations died. Every eye turned toward the entrance. The air itself seemed to tear apart. Flames that burned without consuming anything danced in a growing circle. Then, through the fire, a shape emerged. Pyrus was massive. His scales gleamed like molten metal, shifting between deep crimson and bright orange as he moved. Each scale was the size of a dinner plate. His head alone was larger than most of the station's transport vehicles. 2 horns curved backward from his skull, etched with patterns that seemed to tell stories in a language older than most civilizations present. Wings folded against his body would have stretched across half the hall if opened. His eyes burned with an inner fire, ancient and intelligent. When he opened his mouth to speak, smoke drifted between teeth that could bite through starship hulls. "I am Pyrus, elder of the Flame Peaks. I accept your invitation to talk." His voice was like an avalanche mixed with the roar of a furnace. Every translator device in the room strained to convert his words into hundreds of different languages. Panic erupted. Despite months of preparation, despite assurances from the council that security measures were absolute, the sight of an actual dragon standing in their midst shattered the composure of most delegates. Beings who commanded armies, who negotiated treaties between star systems, who held the fate of billions in their hands, they all scrambled for exits. Torin knocked over another diplomat in his haste to reach the door. Chancellor Vex's security detail formed a protective barrier around her as they retreated. Within seconds, half the hall had emptied. James stood frozen on his platform. Every instinct screamed to him to run, to protect his daughter, to get as far from this creature as possible. But he was Earth's primary ambassador. If he ran, humanity would be shamed. He forced his legs to remain steady, even as sweat dripped down his back. Pyrrhus watched the exodus with an expression James couldn't quite read. Was that disappointment? Resignation? The dragon's burning eyes swept across the emptying hall, cataloging those who remained and those who fled. Then Pyrrhus's gaze stopped. His enormous head tilted slightly, focusing on something near the observation area. James' blood turned to ice. Emma had left the observation room. She had somehow bypassed the security door meant to keep children safe inside. She was walking towards Pyrrhus. "Emma, no!" James's shout was lost in the chaos of evacuating diplomats. He leapt from his platform, landing badly and rolling to his feet. He ran towards his daughter, but she was already too close to the dragon. Too close to those claws, those teeth, that immense power that could end her life with less effort than James would need to swat a fly. Emma stopped about 10 feet from Pyrrhus. She had to tilt her head all the way back to see his face. The dragon lowered his enormous head until his eyes were level with the small human child. For a moment, neither moved. Then Emma spoke. Her voice was clear and curious, holding none of the fear that paralyzed the adults around them. "Why do you look so sad?" The question echoed through the hall. The few diplomats who hadn't fled stopped moving. James stopped running, though his muscles in his body were tensed to sprint forward and grab his daughter. Pyrrhus stared at Emma. Smoke drifted from his nostrils. The heat radiating from his body made the air shimmer. One breath of his flame could reduce her to ash. "Sad?" The dragon's voice was quieter now, though still deep enough to vibrate through the floor. "You think I appear sad, small human?" "Yes," Emma nodded with absolute certainty only children possess. "Your eyes look like my papa's eyes when he misses Mama. Are you lonely?" The silence that followed was absolute. James felt tears threatening. His daughter was either the bravest or foolishest person in the entire galaxy, and he loved her more than he had words to express. He was also certain he was about to watch her die. Pyrrhus made a sound deep in his throat. It took James several seconds to recognize it as a laugh, though not like any laugh he had ever heard. It sounded like rocks tumbling down a mountain, mixed with the crackling of a bonfire. 4,000 years I have lived, and you are the first being to ask me if I am lonely. Yes, small one, I am very lonely." Emma smiled, showing the gap where she had recently lost her first tooth. Then, with the casual fearlessness of childhood, she walked right up to Pyrrhus and hugged his foreleg. Her small arms couldn't reach even a quarter of a way around. The dragon went completely still. James' heart stopped beating. Time itself seemed to pause. Then Pyrrhus lowered his head, gently, carefully, and rested his chin on the floor beside Emma. His eyes, burning with inner fire, looked at the small human child with an expression James recognized despite the alien features. Wonder. "What is your name, little one?" Pyrrhus asked. "Emma Clark. What's yours?" "I am Pyrrhus. And you, Emma Clark, have just done something no being has managed in 5 centuries. The dragon's voice was soft now, almost gentle. You have made me feel less alone. James finally found the strength to move. He approached slowly, carefully, his hands raised to show he meant no threat. Pyrrhus watched him come, but made no aggressive moves. "I apologize for my daughter's forwardness," James said, his voice shaking despite his best efforts to control it. "Your daughter understands something far more important than protocol, Ambassador. She understands that beneath scales or skin, we all are capable of loneliness, of pain, of needing connection." The dragon lifted his head, though he remained lying down to appear less threatening. Emma stayed close to him, one small hand resting on his scales. "I came to this summit expecting fear and greed. I have seen both in abundance today. Every species here either wants something from my kind or fears what we might take from them.
except this child. She simply wanted to know if I was sad. Chancellor Vex emerged from behind a barricade, her security detail hovering close. Great Pyrrhus, we did not intend disrespect. The appearance of your kind after so many years, it caught us unprepared. You were prepared for negotiation, but not for meeting a person. His eyes, still fixed on Emma, softened further. Tell me, Emma Clark, do you know why my kind withdrew from the galaxy? Emma shook her head, pigtails swinging. Because every species we met saw us as tools or weapons or obstacles, never as people. We grew tired of being used, so we left. I came here today wondering if anything had changed. Your daughter has answered that question. Torin crept back into the hall, his scales flush with shame.
Part 2. The Bridge Between Worlds. The Invitation. 3 days after Emma's encounter with Pyrrhus, the Clark family quarters on Nexus Station had become the most visited location in the entire diplomatic district. James found himself hosting impromptu meetings at all hours as ambassadors from dozens of species sought access to the dragons through humanity's unexpected connection. Emma sat cross-legged on the living room floor, coloring a picture of Pyrrhus while diplomats argued over her head. She had drawn him with a smile, which James suspected was more accurate than any official portrait would have been. The door chimed for the 15th time that morning. James answered to find Professor Helen Martinez, Earth's leading xenobiologist, standing with 3 packed cases and an expression of barely contained excitement. Ambassador Clark, I received approval from Earth Commands to join your delegation. I'm here to study dragon physiology, culture, and communication patterns. Helen spoke rapidly, her hands gesturing animationally. This is the opportunity of a lifetime, 5 centuries of mystery about to be unraveled. Professor Martinez, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm not sure Pyrrhus will appreciate being studied like a laboratory specimen. James rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. Papa, someone's at the window. Emma pointed toward the viewport that overlooked the station's exterior. James turned and felt his heart skip. Pyrrhus floated in space beyond the transparent barrier, his massive form backlit by the station's lights. But he wasn't alone. A smaller dragon hovered beside him, her scales a brilliant mixture of gold and bronze that seemed to shimmer even in the vacuum of space. The communication panel beeped. James activated it with trembling hands. Ambassador Clark. Pyrrhus's voice filled the room. I wish to introduce my niece, Solara. She is young by our standards, only 800 years, and has never met another species. I thought Emma might like to meet someone closer to her own stage of life. Emma pressed her face against the viewport, her eyes wide. She's beautiful. Can she come inside, please, Papa? Dragons don't require atmospheres as we do, Professor Martinez whispered, pulling out her recording device. They can survive in any environment. Remarkable adaptation. James activated the communication panel again. Elder Pyrrhus, we would be honored to host you both. Docking Bay 7 can accommodate beings of your size. 20 minutes later, Emma stood in the cavernous docking bay, practically vibrating with excitement. James stood beside her with Professor Martinez and a security detail that he knew was completely useless if the dragons decided to become hostile. The docking doors opened to reveal Pyrrhus and Solara. The younger dragon was perhaps a third of Pyrrhus's size, but still large enough that her head reached 15 feet high. Her eyes were a bright amber color, and unlike Pyrrhus's expression of ancient weariness, Solara looked curious and slightly nervous. Hello, Emma said, waving enthusiastically. I'm Emma. Do you want to be friends? Solara glanced at Pyrrhus, who nodded encouragement. The young dragon lowered her head cautiously. I have never had a friend from another species. Uncle Pyrrhus says you are kind, that you asked if he was lonely. He looked sad. Are you lonely too? Solara's scales rippled with color changes that Professor Martinez frantically cataloged in her notes. Yes, I have never traveled beyond Dragon's Reach. My parents forbid it after what happened to other dragons who trusted outsiders. Emma walked right up to Solara and placed both hands on her snout, just as she had done with Pyrrhus. Well, you can trust me. I promise I'll be a good friend. The simple declaration, spoken with a child's absolute conviction, seemed to affect Solara deeply. The young dragon made a sound like wind chimes mixed with crackling flames. James realized she was crying. Uncle Pyrrhus told me that other species were cruel, that they would see me only as a weapon or a threat, but you see me as someone who could be your friend. That's because you are someone, Emma said matter-of-factly. You're Solara, and friends are important. Professor Martinez stepped forward carefully. Elder Pyrrhus, if I may ask, what happened to dragons who trusted outsiders? The historical records are fragmentary at best. Pyrrhus's eyes dimmed slightly. Betrayal, Professor Martinez. 500 years ago, we shared our knowledge freely. We helped other species with our strength and our fire. We thought we had found true allies. His voice grew heavy. Instead, they attempted to enslave our young ones. They wanted to breed us as weapons. They hunted us for our scales, our bones, our fire glands. James felt sick. We had no idea. Earth's records don't go back that far in galactic history. Because those species ensured the truth was buried, Pyrrhus continued. They portrayed us as monsters who attacked without reason. The real reason we withdrew was survival. We could not trust anyone. But you trust us now? James asked carefully. I trust Emma's heart, Pyrrhus replied, and I am willing to extend that trust to your species, cautiously. You humans are new to the galactic stage. Perhaps you have not yet learned the cruelty that seems to infect older civilizations. 1 year had passed since Emma Clark first asked Pyrrhus if he was lonely. The galaxy had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. Dragon's Reach now hosted permanent embassies from 15 species. Human children traveled regularly to learn dragon culture, while young dragons attended schools across council space. Fear had given way to friendship, and ancient hatred had dissolved into understanding. Emma was 8 now, taller and more confident, though she still wore her hair in pigtails. She split her time between Earth's education system and advanced studies on Dragon's Reach, where she had become fluent in 3 dragon dialects. Today, she stood in the observation dome of Nexus Station with her mother, Rebecca Clark, who had finally returned from her deep space mission. I still can't believe everything that happened while I was away, Rebecca said, wrapping her arm around Emma's shoulders. My little girl became the most famous child in the galaxy. I just wanted to help, Emma replied, watching transport ships drift past. Pyrrhus looked so sad, Mama. I couldn't just ignore that. That's because you have the biggest heart in the universe, Rebecca kissed the top of Emma's head. Just like your father. James entered the observation dome, his expression grave. Emma, Rebecca, I need you both to come to the emergency council chamber. Something's happened. The urgency in his voice sent ice through Emma's chest. Is it Pyrrhus? Is he okay? Is Solara safe? They're fine, sweetheart, but we need to go now. The emergency council chamber was packed. Every major species had representatives present, and holographic projections showed dozens more connecting remotely. Pyrrhus hovered in the center of the room, his massive form surrounded by tactical displays. Beside him were Solara, Ember, Flare, and Crimson, along with several adult dragons Emma had met during her visits. Governor Krell stood at the primary tactical station, his 4 arms manipulating multiple control panels simultaneously. The perimeter sensors detected them 3 hours ago. We've confirmed their trajectory and speed. They'll reach the outer colonies in approximately 6 weeks. What are they? Rebecca asked, her scientist's mind immediately engaged. A holographic display materialized, showing dozens of dark shapes moving through space. They were enormous, each one larger than a battleship, with irregular geometric forms that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The Unharvesters, Pyrrhus said, his voice carrying a weight Emma had never heard before. ancient machines from a dead civilization. They were created to gather resources from any world they encounter, regardless of whether that world is inhabited. Professor Martinez, now a permanent fixture at Nexus Station, pulled up historical data. According to the Dragon archives, the Unharvesters destroyed 17 civilizations before they could be stopped. That was over 3,000 years ago. "We thought they had been destroyed," Solara added, her voice trembling slightly. "My parents told me stories about the Great Harvest War. Dragons fought alongside dozens of species to defeat them. Thousands died." Emma moved closer to Solara, placing her hand on her foreleg. "But you stopped them before. You can stop them again." "That's when the galaxy was united," Pyrrhus replied. "Before the betrayals, before the divisions. We fought together then. We had unity of purpose." Chancellor Vex's compound eyes reflected the tactical displays. "Are you saying we need that same unity now?" "I'm saying that without it, we will all perish." Pyrrhus's eyes swept across the assembled delegates. "The Unharvesters do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They consume everything in their path and move on. Planets, stations, ships, all are simply raw materials to them." Governor Krell's tactical analysis appeared on the displays. "Our combined fleet strength is significant, but according to the Dragon historical data, conventional weapons are only marginally effective against Harvester hulls. They adapt to whatever attacks them." "Dragonfire can damage them," Ember spoke up. Her voice was stronger now than it had been a year ago, confidence built through countless positive interactions with other species. "But not permanently. They repair themselves using harvested materials." "Then how did you defeat them before?" Ambassador Torin asked, his scales pale with fear. "Coordination," Pyrrhus answered. "Dragons provided the destructive power, but other species provided tactical analysis, resource management, and strategic planning. We attacked their command nodes simultaneously across 12 systems. It took 5 years of constant warfare and cost millions of lives." The chamber fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Emma felt Rebecca's hand tighten on her shoulder. "We don't have 5 years," James said quietly, "and we don't have the unity that existed back then. There are still species that distrust dragons, that resist the cultural exchanges." "Then we must build that unity quickly," Chancellor Vex declared, "or we will all become raw materials for ancient machines." The Bridge Builder. Over the next week, Emma watched as the adults struggled to coordinate a defense. Old prejudices resurfaced under pressure. Some species wanted dragons to bear the brunt of the fighting, treating them once again as weapons rather than allies. Others refused to commit their fleets to defend dragon territories, seeing it as humanity's problem since humans had chosen to ally with dragons. Emma sat in her family quarters, listening to her parents discuss the deteriorating situation. James looked exhausted, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Rebecca paced, her scientific mind trying to find solutions to political problems. Species that were learning to cooperate are reverting to old patterns. Fear is making them selfish again. They need to remember why they started cooperating in the first place. They need to remember the connections they've built. Emma stood up suddenly, an idea crystallizing in her mind. "I know what to do." Both parents looked at her. "Sweetheart, this is very complex," James began gently. "No, Papa, it's actually simple." Emma moved to the communication console. "We need to remind everyone what we've learned this year. Not the adults, they're too scared to remember. We need to remind the children." Within hours, Emma had contacted Oliver, Jasmine, and Thomas. She reached out to young dragons across Dragon's Reach and to children from every species participating in the cultural exchange program. Her message was simple. Meet at the Central Plaza of Nexus Station tomorrow. Bring your friends, both human and dragon, and everyone else. The next morning, the Central Plaza was filled with children and young dragons, hundreds of them, representing dozens of species. Their parents and teachers watched from the edges, confused about what was happening. Emma stood on a raised platform with Solara beside her. Oliver, Jasmine, and Thomas stood with Ember, Flare, and Crimson. Other children stood with their dragon friends, and young dragons stood with friends from species that had once feared them. "Hi, everyone," Emma said, her voice amplified by the station's speaker system. "A year ago, I met Pyrrhus and asked him if he was lonely. I was just being nice, but it changed everything. We've all made friends this year.
Dragon friends, human friends, friends from all over the galaxy. Solara spoke next, her young voice clear and strong. Before I met Emma, I thought other species were cruel. My parents told me never to trust anyone that wasn't a dragon. But Emma showed me that trust is possible, that friendship is real. Oliver adjusted his glasses nervously, but spoke with conviction. I was scared of dragons at first, I won't lie about that. But Ember taught me that being different doesn't mean being dangerous. She's my best friend now. One by one, children and young dragons shared their stories. A young insectoid from Chancellor Vex's species talked about how Crimson had helped her overcome her fear of fire by showing her that it could warm without burning. A small reptilian from Torin's world described how Flare had defended him from bullies who said dragons were monsters. Emma raised her voice again. Our parents are scared right now. They're scared of the harvesters, and when people get scared, they forget how to work together. They start seeing problems instead of people. But we remember. We remember that our friends are our friends, no matter what species they are. Jasmine stepped forward, her artistic nature giving her words poetic weight. The grown-ups are arguing about who should fight and who should hide, but we're not arguing. We already know the answer. We fight together, because that's what friends do. They protect each other. Thomas, always analytical, added, according to the historical data, the only way to defeat the unharvesters is through perfect coordination between dragons and other species, not just military coordination, trust, real trust, the kind that only comes from actually knowing and caring about each other. Ember spread her wings, a gesture that no longer frightened the children gathered below. We young dragons are willing to fight alongside our friends, not because someone commands us, but because we choose to protect those we care about. The plaza erupted in cheers and roars from the assembled children and young dragons. The sound was deafening, and more importantly, it was unified. Species that had been enemies for generations were cheering together. Emma looked out at the crowd, then up at the adults watching from the plaza's edges. She saw her parents, tears streaming down their faces. She saw Governor Krell, his armored face unreadable, but his posture suggesting deep thought. Chancellor Vex conceived from an observation platform. The children shame us with their wisdom, she announced, her voice amplified across the plaza. We adults have allowed old fears to override new friendships. No more. My fleets will fight alongside dragons to defend all our worlds, because Crimson is right. Friends protect friends. Governor Krell joined her. The Vanguard military coalition will commit our full strength, not because of strategic calculations, but because young Ember has shown my own children that courage and compassion can coexist. Ambassador Torin stepped forward, his scales flushed with emotion. The young reptilian spoke truth. Flare defended my nephew when I had taught him to fear all dragons. I owe a debt I can never fully repay.